Now, if someone's looking at conquering diabetes, initially they also need to eliminate all your healthy sugars, like your palm sugar, your maple syrup and honey. So they need to be stopped until the pancreas is starting to, you see, high glucose demands high insulin. So when blood glucose levels are high, the pancreas is getting screamed at, quick, insulin, more insulin.
Have you ever eaten regularly, yet still felt sluggish, exhausted, or tired? Then you are not alone. Energy changes are a common pattern, and Barbara O'Neill has some shocking revelations about why this could be the case. So, without delaying any further, let's just dive right in. Diets high in carbohydrates. Our daily diet plays a crucial role in our overall health. As Barbara O'Neill notes, diets nowadays are high in carbohydrates. Consider the foods you eat every day. Bread, sandwiches, and cereal for breakfast. These meals are all heavy in carbohydrates. Our bodies convert them into glucose, which is the main form of sugar used as fuel. She emphasizes that consuming too many carbohydrates is the issue rather than the carbs themselves.
The non-essential food group is carbohydrates. Let me define that. I'm not saying carbohydrates are bad. I'd be a fool to do that. We love them, we enjoy them. They're not bad. They only pose a problem when they're overdone and refined.
Refined carbohydrates and sugars are abundant in modern diets, considerably more than what our systems can metabolize. Our system may get overloaded with this continuous glucose inflow, which might result in a number of health problems, including insulin resistance and fatigue. Barbara says that these high-carb diets cause a surge in our blood sugar levels. Our pancreas responds to this increase by releasing insulin, which is a hormone that facilitates the uptake of glucose by cells from the bloodstream. However, our insulin levels are chronically increased when we consume large amounts of carbs on a regular basis. This can ultimately lead to insulin resistance, a condition in which cells become less responsive to insulin and absorb less glucose. Because of this inefficiency, we may experience fatigue and tiredness. The pathway of glucose. Barbara O'Neill explores the glucose route to see why too much glucose causes weariness. The first step is glycolysis, which is a process that occurs when glucose enters our cells. Energy is produced via a 10-step metabolic pathway that breaks down glucose. The surprising thing is that, regardless of how complex the process is, each glucose molecule only produces 2 ATP units. Imagine working very hard for very little return. That's basically what glycolysis does. Although the process by which our bodies turn glucose into energy is complex and requires substantial energy, the amount of energy produced is surprisingly little. One of the main causes of people's frequent fatigue following meals high in carbohydrates is this inefficiency in glycolysis. Barbara explains that 2 molecules of pyruvate are created from 1 glucose molecule during glycolysis. This cycle happens in the cell's cytoplasm and requires various enzymes and coenzymes to help the reactions along. Specific enzymes are required at each phase of the cycle to catalyze the transformation of glucose, which leads to the creation of pyruvate. The net energy gained by glycolysis is just 2 ATP molecules, despite the numerous processes involved. This is due to the fact that although 2 ATP molecules are used during the initial stages of glycolysis, 4 ATP molecules are produced in the later stages. As a result, only 2 ATP molecules are gained overall for each glucose molecule metabolized. The body cannot satisfy its energy needs from this limited production, particularly when it is primarily dependent on carbohydrates. She further adds that the pyruvate molecules can be further metabolized in the mitochondria via the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, producing more ATP after glycolysis. But unlike glycolysis, this extra energy synthesis is oxygen dependent and takes longer. The energy production is low in low oxygen environments and in diets heavy in carbohydrates, where glycolysis is the major energy pathway.
The end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into the powerhouse. Now this little pathway is called the powerhouse because even though it's only an 8-step pathway, it delivers to us a very impressive 36 units of energy. The difference is oxygen. So this pathway is an aerobic pathway because it uses oxygen. This pathway is an anaerobic pathway because it does not use oxygen. It produces its energy by the process of fermentation.
Extra glucose storage. Barbara O'Neill explains that our bodies convert carbohydrates into glucose when we ingest large quantities of them. This glucose is first utilized to meet immediate energy requirements, but when we take in more glucose than our systems need, we have to store it. Glycogen is the first type of storage material and is found in the muscles and liver. The body can use glycogen as an easily accessible energy source when fasting or engaging in more physical activity. Barbara notes that muscles can store around 400 grams of glycogen, while the liver can only hold about 100 grams. Any extra glucose needs to be handled differently once these glycogen reserves are full. At this point, the body starts to convert the extra glucose into fat. This whole process is known as lipogenesis. During lipogenesis, the liver produces fatty acids, which culminate in the formation of triglycerides. Adipose tissue receives these triglycerides and stores them as body fat. Body fat content and obesity. Now, have you ever wondered why we are all getting so obese and overweight lately? Well, Barbara O'Neill draws attention to a crucial point: the obesity epidemic's connection to excess glucose storage. She contends that a major contributing factor to the alarming rise in obesity rates in nations like Australia and America is a diet heavy in carbohydrates. When the body continuously consumes carbohydrates, its glycogen reserves are constantly filled, which means that the conversion of glucose to fat happens automatically. This causes body fat to accumulate over time. She states that the physiological impacts of accumulating additional fat are more important to consider than simply the numbers on the weight scale. Being overweight has been linked to various medical conditions, including insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic syndrome. Visceral fat, or fat accumulated around the organs, is particularly dangerous. According to Barbara, the body gets into a vicious cycle when it is frequently exposed to elevated insulin and glucose levels.
It's not the fat. It's actually this excess glucose that the body can't use forces the liver to store it as fat.
The body stores even more fat as insulin resistance increases because it must produce more insulin to control blood sugar levels. Two pathways of glucose metabolism: aerobic and anaerobic. She also compares the more efficient aerobic glucose pathway to the anaerobic, oxygen-free pathway. The anaerobic pathway, known as glycolysis, takes place in the cell's cytoplasm and doesn't need oxygen. It converts glucose into pyruvate very quickly, generating very little ATP, just 2 ATP molecules. It is often considered a less efficient method and is associated with various health issues.
Units of energy. Now, the end result of that 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate gets fed into the next section of the cell. This little 8-step pathway delivers to us a whopping 36 units of energy. This is called an anaerobic pathway because it doesn't use oxygen. It produces energy by the process of fermentation. That's where a cancer cell lives.
On the other hand, the aerobic pathway, also referred to as oxidative phosphorylation, occurs in the cell's mitochondria and requires oxygen. With a maximum of 36 ATP molecules produced for every glucose molecule, this pathway is significantly more efficient. According to Barbara, pyruvate produced during glycolysis is further broken down in the Krebs cycle, sometimes referred to as the citric acid cycle. During aerobic respiration, high-energy electron carriers are created by this cycle and then join the electron transport chain, which is where the majority of ATP is made. The aerobic pathway uses a variety of substrates, including fats, and produces a significantly higher amount of ATP. This implies that the body may use stored fat as fuel, making it a more reliable and sustainable energy source. Barbara emphasizes how important this efficiency is to sustaining constant energy levels throughout the day. Connection between glucose and cancer cells.
One of the problems today, one of the causes of obesity, rising cancer, heart disease, is this carbohydrate diet because it stores as fat.
So, Barbara explores a crucial and concerning aspect of high glucose environments. They're linked to the growth of cancer cells. She explains that a unique metabolic mechanism distinguishes cancer cells from healthy ones. These cells thrive in anaerobic, high-glucose environments. She highlights the vicious cycle created by cancer cells' demand for glucose. Raised blood glucose levels increase the risk of cancer cell growth, and as these cells proliferate, their requirement for glucose expands. Since cancer cells consume glucose at a rapid pace and deprive healthy cells of nutrients, this is why cancer patients often feel extreme fatigue and experience weight loss. Moreover, Barbara states that the acidic environment surrounding cancer cells is a product of anaerobic glycolysis, specifically lactate. This acidic environment further promotes the aggressiveness of cancer cells, while impairing the immune cell's ability to combat the growth. In this way, an anaerobic, high-glucose environment not only encourages cancer growth, but also sustains the metabolism of cancer cells.
Status. So if someone wanted to conquer diabetes, what would they drastically drop? Yes, the carbohydrates. If someone wanted to conquer cancer, what would they drastically drop? Yes, the carbohydrates. If someone wanted to lose weight in a hurry, what would they...
Alternative sources of energy. Barbara also discusses how, in the event that carbohydrate consumption is decreased, the body may produce energy from fat and protein. She explains that our bodies have evolved mechanisms for using various macronutrients as fuel. The body shifts from relying on glucose as its primary energy source to utilizing fats and proteins when carbohydrate consumption is restricted.
I'm not referring to honey, maple syrup, the natural or the coconut sugars. I'm referring to the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugarcane plant. I thank God that there are many alternatives, but if someone has diabetes, they can't even take those natural sugars until the pancreas is strong.
Ketosis is a process involved in this metabolic shift. Low carbohydrate diets cause insulin levels to drop, and the body starts breaking down stored fat into glycerol and fatty acids. These fatty acids are converted by the liver into ketone bodies, which the brain and other tissues can use as an alternative energy source. According to O'Neill, ketone bodies are a more efficient fuel source than glucose. Because they generate more ATP per molecule, they offer sustained energy without the ups and downs associated with diets high in carbohydrates. This consistent energy output is particularly beneficial for maintaining mental clarity and endurance. She also points out that a diet high in healthy fats and adequate protein supports maintaining muscle mass and a healthy body composition. Healthy fats, present in nuts, seeds, avocados, and oily fish, provide essential fatty acids. These fatty acids are vital for hormone production and brain function. Additionally, proteins serve as the building blocks of muscles, enzymes, and other essential bodily processes. Food trends in history. Barbara explores dietary habits throughout history, showing how, in contrast to current diets, our ancestors ate more vegetables and fewer carbohydrates. She notes that for most of human history, people consumed a diet rich in plant-based foods, lean meats, and healthy fats, which were staples of human diets. Since there were no refined grains or added sugars, natural products were consumed as they were seasonally available, which naturally limited carbohydrate intake. According to Barbara O'Neill, meals of the past were high in fiber, vitamins, and minerals, all of which supported overall well-being and maintained steady energy levels.
So because of that, your carbohydrate part of your meal is your negotiating part of the meal. And the negotiations change depending on your height, depending on your size, depending on your age, depending on your physical...
Consuming whole, unprocessed foods prevented the highs and lows linked to sugary, high-carb diets by releasing energy gradually. In particular, vegetables were vital for supplying essential nutrients and preserving stable blood sugar levels. These cultures did not suffer from the chronic illnesses that affect modern civilization, such as obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular problems, because they did not consume refined sugars or carbohydrates. Reference for the Atkins diet. Barbara references Dr. Robert Atkins' research to highlight the benefits of a low-carb approach. During the 1970s, cardiologist Dr. Atkins popularized the low-carb diet by advocating a reduction in sugar intake to promote weight loss and increased energy. The Atkins diet emphasizes consuming fats and proteins while limiting carbohydrates to induce ketosis in the body.
Survive in the presence of oxygen. You see, Dr. Atkins discovered that all his cancer patients were going into remission. I don't know whether he realized at the time of writing his book or the time of his death, the full ramifications of that.
Barbara discusses the number of people who followed the Atkins diet and experienced significant weight loss and improved energy levels.
Dr. Robert Atkins decided to do an experiment on himself. He decided to stop all carbohydrates. He ate a lot of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. So there was his protein. And meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs was also supplying another food group, which was fat. Few things happened. His weight just fell off.
Restricting carbs forces the body to switch to burning fat as its primary energy source. This change in metabolism not only aids in weight loss, but also enhances energy levels and stabilizes blood sugar. Consuming whole foods, vegetables, and healthy fats provides sustained energy without the need for frequent meals, which is why the Atkins diet places such emphasis on it.
Sick of the sight of you. So how to recover from insulin resistance is to get the glucose, those carbohydrates right down. Get the fiber up. The good.
She highlights how the Atkins diet's principles have influenced modern dietary approaches, such as the popular ketogenic diet.
So when I had a man come to our program who said to me, he was a businessman, he said, "I know you're not going to like it, Barbara, but I go so well on the Atkins diet." Now, if I'm worth anything, what am I going to do?
Listen.
I'm going to listen. Because this is his body. It works well. I was interested. And I was interested in a way that I'd never been interested before. Because people used to say, "Oh, that Atkins diet's terrible. Meat, butter, cream cheese, eggs." So I thought, "Oh, well, I'm not too interested in that." But I became interested in this man.
Barbara makes a strong argument for reconsidering our eating patterns in her thorough examination. Understanding how glucose affects our bodies and adopting diets that support metabolic health can help us control our weight, have more energy, and lower our risk of developing chronic illnesses like cancer. So, what do you think about carbohydrate intake? Are you going to limit them in your diet? Let us know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to subscribe and like our channel for more amazing content.